One Radio. My name is Ernest Kanjo, and on the other side we have Noella Masri. Noella, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Ernest. How are you?
I'm doing great. We thank God. And so, Apex One Radio is here for you. And coming up next is the Apex One News Magazine. It's a comeback edition. It's true, we've been away for a couple of months because we're handling other things. But we're back for this great radio news production. Call it the Apex One News Magazine. Maxwell Ajit is producing this segment of broadcast from Waldshut in Germany. And of course, the entire Apex One radio team is here to monitor this edition of the news magazine, which now begins at exactly 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't go away. Good evening and welcome to the Apex One News Magazine. I am Ernest Kanjo in Columbus, Ohio.
And I'm Nuwaila Mazrui.
On the program today, weeks after the United States withdraw its troops from Afghanistan following a Taliban takeover of Kabul, there are still speculations on America's military might. But as some observers compare Afghanistan to Vietnam, opponents of Joe Biden think he is a weakling who has just opened up America to the country's long-term critics. On the program today, we get an in-depth analysis on the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Political analyst Roderick Numyang joins us right ahead.
And can young people change the perspective of climate change skeptics after the Norwegian rendezvous in November? That is certainly the question on the minds of promoters of the climate change agenda, who are charged with the responsibility of reversing the opinion that very little has been done to tackle global warming since the 1992 Earth Summit. Ahead of the 26th Global Conference on Climate Change, youths around the world met for a pre-conference in Milan last week. On the program today, we talked to one of the Milan pre-conference participants from Cameroon.
And in sports reporters are back to their newsrooms after what has been described as enriched sessions with college basketball officials last week. The 2021 Big Ten Media Day took place in Indianapolis, in Indiana. Sports reporter Michael Moore assesses the sports media event. Plus, he throws more light on the Big Ten basketball competition. These stories and more will be developed right ahead in this edition of the Apex One News Magazine. Don't go away. This is the Apex One News magazine.
A total of 1,461,932 cases of COVID-19 have been recorded in Ohio since the start of the pandemic in March 2020. This is contained in the latest report by the Ohio Department of Health, which further states that there have been 75,389 hospitalizations so far, with 9,665 admitted to the ICU. According to the report, the state has so far lost 22,819 people to the coronavirus. Yesterday, more than 3,185 new cases were detected and 201 hospitalized, with more than 19 taken to the ICU. On Friday alone, 329 people died from COVID-19 in Ohio.
A total of 6,365,590 people in Ohio have been involved in the vaccination process, representing 54.46% of the total population. In the past weeks, there has been a disturbing rise in the number of new cases daily, despite repeated calls for people to act with caution while interacting. An indoor mask mandate declared by the mayor of Columbus, the state's chief city, does not seem to be taken seriously at a time the Delta variant is set to be more devastating. Updates on this in our subsequent news editions. This is the Apex One News magazine.
One of President Biden's earliest promises in office was a pledge to withdraw all troops from Afghanistan by September 11th this year. And beginning in August, the world witnessed a frantic attempt at a clean break from America's longest war in history, as US backed Afghan troops were quickly overwhelmed by Taliban forces in a violent takeover. Here with us today for an in-depth analysis on the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan, our resident political analyst, Roderick Numia. Welcome, Roderick, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Noella, and hello to you, Enes Kanjo.
Let's begin with a little background on US engagement in Afghanistan. President Biden's proposed date for full withdrawal was not chosen at random. It marked, of course, the 20th anniversary of the Al Qaeda attacks on 9/11. In hindsight, what is the general consensus about the decision to go to war in Afghanistan following the 9/11 attacks?
Um, Americans on the streets have mixed feelings about the um, invasion of Afghanistan, and this came as a backdrop of President Bush 43 going to Iraq in the first place. And he felt like the Taliban was an extension of the Al Qaeda group, and the United States needed to go after this group as well. Now, fast forward, looking at the human and financial cost of it, Americans are torn even as to was this effort even worth it in the first place. We have folks on the one side thinking, yes, our country was attacked and we needed to go abroad to make sure that this didn't happen again. But we have another people thinking, well, it's cost us so much money. It's cost a lot of Afghan lives and it's also cost a lot of American lives. And it's
Now, Roderick, it's been 20 years, and in that time, we've witnessed major shifts in the dynamics of internal politics in the Middle East. How has that affected US engagement in Afghanistan, specifically in terms of the cost of war, both human and financial?
yes, if you look at the American military budget, it is very high. It's above $700 billion. That is more than the next 10 military budgets in the world combined. So we're looking at if you're going to add up the next 10 superpowers after the United States, you realize that America invests a lot of money in their military budget. This has caused some critics at home to say that's That's not logical, considering the fact that there are other issues going on at home. We look at healthcare, we look at the economy, we look at education. Some Americans feel that we could have um, invested some of this money. And you're also looking at recent coronavirus. Some studies have found out that if you took 2% of the US military budget and invested in its healthcare system, America would have been well equipped to handle a pandemic like the coronavirus. Now, that has made internal politics steep because if any politicians, the Obamas, the Biden, the Clintons, when they propose the readjustment of the US military budget, they were recognized, they were viewed as anti-military. Now, abroad in Afghanistan, the US war has made America look like the global policeman, have a strange relationship. And I must say, in the case of Afghanistan, America has lost. Um, we, the US went to Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban, but they left Afghanistan in the hands of the Taliban. So mission not accomplished in this case. Back to you guys in the studio.
Now, both military and political experts, including many of President Biden's supporters, say that full withdrawal was in fact a mistake and that the US should have kept some troops on the ground to mitigate the transition. Can you give us a quick breakdown of the Biden administration's proposed plan for withdrawal and why it failed?
So for over 20 years, so after Bush went to Afghanistan, George Bush Jr., every single US president after that had promised that we are going to withdraw from Afghanistan. So Obama made the promise, didn't keep it. Trump made the promise, didn't keep it. Biden felt like this was his opportunity to keep up that promise because the general consensus back at home was to withdraw from Afghanistan completely. And the Biden strategy was to withdraw completely. But when Trump initiated this deal with the Taliban, he didn't execute it because the military intelligence on the ground was if you leave totally at the same time, it's going to cause a chaos in transition, which is what Biden did. Biden decided to leave completely, and the result was a chaos. Now, he blames it on some military advice he got from his military advisors. But the decision was ultimately the president's. These advisors tell him, we suggest you do this, we suggest you do that. In this case, withdraw all the troops. We are going to use artificial intelligence. We're going to use surveillance to supervise the activities of the Taliban. But this caused that immediate transitional chaos. The US was supposed to, in hindsight, evacuate all its citizens that wanted to evacuate before initiating the total withdrawal of American troops, NS.
Roderick, what about the so-called Doha Agreement? It appears that the U.S. Taliban deal signed during the Trump administration may in fact have made a difficult situation worse for the current administration. What is your opinion on that?
Now, again, President Biden was trying to build up on progress that was initiated by the Trump administration. It wasn't the best of deals, but since the general consensus, every president wants to have on their sleeve promise made, promise kept. Biden ran on the premise that we are getting out of Afghanistan at every cost possible. So the agreement that President Trump signed put President Biden in a bind, but he had to follow through and make sure the US left Afghanistan. However, the strategy on how they left is the problem, as you guys all know, withdrawing completely one day in August, say, okay, we're out of here, we don't have anything to do. But as I said, this is one of the poor, execution of America foreign policy, because the moment they left, the Taliban, whom they went there in the first place to get rid of, became the government that is running Afghanistan today, NS and Noella.
Well, Roderick, thank you. It's good to have you back on the show. As usual, a very informative breakdown of the situation in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Th- Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Apex One News Magazine.
Since March of 2020, when the United States experienced its first ever health emergency related nationwide lockdown, the government at every level has been providing support in all forms to citizens and institutions. So far, trillions of dollars have been dispatched to help Americans across the country through various programs and support initiatives.
One of such initiatives is the Child Care Initiative, meant for the childcare industry. In a recent move, $3.5 million was disbursed to child care centers in Columbus at an event that brought together stakeholders in the domain. Okon Ekwenyong spoke with Miss Steve Norman, Executive Director at the Columbus-based Heavenly Kids Center for Learning. Our reporter began by finding out how her center was coping with COVID-19, especially during this time when cases are increasingly going up. That was Misty Norman, Executive Director of the Child Care Initiative for the Columbus-based Heavenly Kids Center for Learning. She was speaking there to our reporter, Okon Ekweyon. This is the Apex One Radio News magazine. In a related story, if water is a source of life, drinkable water is even more important. The lack of potable water is one of the major causes of disease in many communities in third world countries. In Africa, so many communities suffer or struggle with this problem and resort to drinking unclean water that exposes them to waterborne diseases. The lack of potable water may soon be history in many parts of Zimbabwe and eventually across Africa, thanks to the Drill for Life organization. Drill for Life is a non-profit organization that partners with the city of Columbus to provide potable water to communities in Zimbabwe.
To execute these projects, Drill for Life sources funding from donor organizations and receives support from the local government in Central Ohio through annual fundraisers. Recently, our reporter caught up with co-founder of Drill for Life, Sim Masweld, who in the company of State Representative Richard Brown reiterated the mission of the organization. Okon Ekpanyong spoke to both men in the following conversation.
That was our reporter Okon Ekweyon talking to officials of the Reach for Life. He was speaking with the founder, C. Maxwell, and the state representative, Richard Brown, on the annual fundraiser, which is aimed at mobilizing funds to finance waterborne projects in some villages in Zimbabwe. This is the Apex One News magazine. If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Apex One News magazine.
It's been almost 2 months since students at various levels of education resumed in-person classes. Campus attendance has been forbidden for an entire academic year following the global COVID-19 pandemic that forced the close of public institutions and restricted human gatherings in a bid to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Virtual learning became the order of academia last year, an experience that was new to many students, teachers, and instructors. Despite continuing incidents of infection, in-person learning has resumed, with students and teachers taking strict measures to control the spread of the virus. Today, we revisit the past year and recall some of the lessons learned. Now, joining us is Kwana Abazie, an educator in Central Ohio. Kwan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the past year has required many adjustments in the education sector. As a teacher, when did you initially become aware of the changes in how you would be teaching? And was that your first experience in virtual instruction?
Yes, it was. Excuse me. On the school year of 2019, 2020 is when teachers, we were experiencing a COVID virus. It came and we had to quickly adjust, leaving the classroom and then going home. And during that year, the school where I was teaching at, we didn't have any type of virtual learning because it was something that it was new. It was new to everyone. So we had to quickly adapt and come up with new ways of still engaging our students and instructing them.
By the time you came to the end of the virtual learning school year, what impression did you have about how much students had learned or had not learned?
Well, the beginning of last school year, teaching from my actual classroom, but teaching virtually. I had to quickly adjust and come up with some great ideas to engage the students while they're online. So working with them, repeating things to them, having them learn things repetitively, and just keeping them focused and encouraging them more than just teaching them about the academics and everything like that, but just speaking with them and encouraging them because, all the students were dealing with social and emotional trauma and everything like that. So we teachers, we had to come up with some very different ways in order to engage the student and also keep a close rapport with their parents. So I would say during that, it showed me as a teacher, and I know some other colleagues of mine, we shared our stories and things that we did, and those outcomes came out in the test scores at the end of the school year.
How much has this experience changed your process as a teacher? And do you envision a time when maybe online teaching may well become the standard form of education?
It has changed. It has, changed me. And I have a different outlook on being an educator during this pandemic. It helped me to I had to adapt. And then teachers we already wearing so many hats as it is. So we became IT specialists. We a lot of times in teaching online, we will run into some some situations where, you know, learning about Google Classroom and some other things, everything that we had to teach, it was virtual. So not only were we teaching the students, the students were teaching me as well. You know, with some things in the IT part, the kids knew and I didn't know. So they were teaching me as well. So I just have a better outlook and understanding of myself and what I endured and what I learned. And I just feel like from now on, you know, I can conquer anything. So.
Right. So, Kwan, you are on a break to handle other projects. You just told us that off mic. Reason why you are not currently teaching in the classroom. However, have you been speaking to some of your colleagues? And if so, what are they telling you about the experience they are having with students who've been away for a while and they are back in the classroom?
Well, I have several colleagues who are teachers. It's various of experiences. Some more are behaviors coming in back into the classroom, trying to calm down the children and, you know, the students and everything like that. Others are just missing the kids, missing that physical interaction with our students. And one thing that I miss was before the pandemic. I'm a teacher. I love to hug because a lot of our students, you know, they look forward to getting hugs and getting love from their teachers. So we have to wear our masks and we have to do the elbow bumps, but you know, I have to hug they're my babies, you know. So a lot of my colleagues we sharing our different stories of how we miss that physical interaction with our students.
Well, we thank you for joining us, Ms. Abazier, and we hope for the best as you and your students transition back into in-person learning. I'm sure many would agree that teachers really have been some of the unsung heroes during this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Apex One News Magazine.
In media and entertainment, streaming platforms have undoubtedly become the vanguard for global new cinema in the modern era, and Netflix continues to lead the pack. With the advent of camera phones replete with features that can comfortably compete with industry standards, as well as home editing software and a voracious appetite for new content, a meager investment can make award-winning filmmakers of any of us. And streamers, of course, provide an accessible venue for distribution for newcomers where none existed before.
We will come back to that story in this edition of the Apex One News magazine with guest actor Davis Best, who will be joining us right away from Maryland. This is the Apex One News magazine. You are listening to the Apex One News magazine, reaching you live from Apex One Radio. The world is still recovering from the unusual outage suffered by three leading social media apps early last week, which brought online interaction on those platforms to a standstill. For almost 7 hours, there was total blackout on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, causing untold worries. According to Facebook, whose family of apps include Instagram and WhatsApp, the outage was caused by a cascade of errors made during maintenance of the network. A vice president of the outfit explained that the problem occurred in a network which connects Facebook's data center around the world and known as Backbone. Amongst those affected by this outage were online businesses, especially the ones that operate on these apps. Bonte and Jebel is an online marketing expert and promoter of digital technology. And he now joins us to explain just what they went through. Bonte, welcome to the program. Welcome to the program, Bonte. Okay, our guest will be joining us shortly, and we will come back to that story. Let's find out if he's there. Monte, welcome to the program. Okay, we'll come back to that story. This is the Apex One News magazine, reaching you from Apex One Radio.
Ernest, you need to unmute.
In 2020, actually, I was Green Ambassador for the Climate in Africa. Fast forward to 2021, I was the only Cameroonian chosen for the World Bank as a World Bank Group Global Youth Climate Network Ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got the call to apply, because we were choosing 2 per country to represent our countries at the pre-COP, of course, it was a competitive process. About 8,900 applicants across the globe, and fortunately, 400 were chosen across the globe, and I was among. So it has been a journey, and when this opportunity came up, my application spoke for itself, and because of the work I've done on the field over the years, I guess that's why I got the seat at the table too.
Right. So what were the highlights of the deliberation in Milan?
Highlights of the deliberation. First of all, since it was youth-oriented, the most important, or let's say the foremost deliberation was youth and climate negotiations. How are the youths involved in decision making? You know, if you listen closely, or let me use an example of the speech Greta Thunberg made. She complained about world leaders talking, and no work done. And young people are tired. So the deliberations were like, young people are supposed to have a seat at that table. Mm-hmm. Young people are supposed to make decisions for themselves because the future belongs to us. And world leaders, please walk the talk. It's too much talking for over the years, and there's just nothing that has been done. And thirdly, I'm going to use a little bit like Nakate, the climate activist, talked about Africa, contributing just 3% of carbon emission, yet we are the ones who are suffering the most effects. So the deliberations were like, you know what, Africa needs the money to fight climate change. So yeah, those are the little highlights of what we had in Milan.
I'm talking about
youth
Africa.
and youth engagement.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm talking about Africa. You come from that continent,
Cameroon,
which is yet to understand the concept of climate change. Yet, Africa is potentially the most vulnerable victim of this environmental issue. How much attention was paid on the delegation from Africa at the pre-conference? And did you have the feeling that the world is ready to pay attention to Africa and protect the continent from the dangers of climate change?
To be honest with you, the attention paid on Africa was not what we expected. Because Africa is a victim continent, and as far as climate change is concerned, but the attention we got was not what we expected. We expected more, we expected more, but we didn't get what we didn't get it, because I can tell you that many young people, many Africans were complaining. Truth be told, many Africans were complaining, I expected that, they should have most of us being on the forefront, but it wasn't the case. It was more like Africans were pushing their way through. Of course, there was Vanessa Nakate, Of course, we had Elizabeth Wathuti put on the billboard outside. Of course, we had Nizreen talk on behalf of her working group, and a couple of other Africans, yes. But that is not what we expected. That's not what we expected. We expected more African voices, but what we got there was more of the West. Sorry to say so, but that's the spanking truth.
So what were some of the major resolutions taken, and what will be the content of what you young people will be presenting at Glasgow come November?
Mm-hmm. All right. First, most importantly, some of the resolutions taken were to include climate change into school curricula. It's a global emergency, and many people do not know. Many people are taking it for a joke. It's a global emergency. Countries like, I think, Italy, South Africa, and the South African minister pledged to have it included in school curricula. Egypt, the same thing. And young people were like, we have to include climate change education into our school curricula. Secondly, young people were of the opinion that they be given a seat on the table, not as observers or not as second in line, but equal partners. Young people deserve an equal seat on the negotiation table, because the future belongs to us. The future is ours. This generation will pass. What about the generation? We are in our 20s. When those people in the 60s walk away, what becomes of this generation? And you can see how fast and how terrible climate change is having an effect on our environment. So young people were like, we need a seat on that table. And thirdly, the pledges which were made, let's say the developed countries had pledged to put funds together to help the global South. What have become of those funds? Yes, because now the young people are like, okay, we need to get these funds to get this work done. Too much talk, less work. So young people are of the opinion that we get a seat on the table as equal partners. I underscore equal partners, and not just maybe observers or people who are going to come and nod their heads. No, and and what the world leaders promise, what the developed countries promise. I mean, they should see into it. This is the time. This is the time to fight climate change, not when the entire continent has been ravaged by the effects of such a global emergency. And what is we carried forward to Glasgow. It's just what I've told you. We want to be heard. We young people want to be heard. And climate change is real. And let these people, let the world leaders understand that power belongs to us. So definitely, and the funds disbursed, because we need the money. It's almost, because if I remember quite well, Vanessa Nakate talked about money. Where is the money? We need to plant the trees. We need to plant the trees. We need this. We need that. If we have to set up organizations and companies, if you have to stop the carbon emissions, we need companies. If we have to plant trees, we need money. We need money. So young people have the opinion, these things have to be seen into. There's so much talking over the years, but there's no work done. So young people they're down this time. They're down this time for business.
Raisa is a Cameroonian and one of the young Africans who were selected to take part at the pre-conference of the United Nations Climate Change, which took place in Milan last week. That conference was aimed at preparing for the UN 26th conference on climate change that takes place in Glasgow. Raisa, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're listening to the Apex One News Magazine. I'm back to our story on technology. Streaming platforms are undoubtedly the vanguard for global news cinema. Sorry, we'll come back to that story. We're having some technical issues here. This is the Apex One News Magazine, reaching you live from Apex One Radio. And back to our story on technology. The world is still recovering from the unusual outage suffered by 3 leading social media apps early last week, which brought online interaction on those platforms to a standstill. For almost 7 hours, there was total blackout on Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, causing untold worries. According to Facebook, whose family of apps include Instagram and WhatsApp, the outage was caused by a cascade of errors made during maintenance of the network. The vice president of Facebook explained that the problem occurred in a network which connects Facebook's data center around the world and known as Backbone. Amongst those affected by this outage were online businesses, especially the ones that operate on these apps. Bonte Njebere is an online marketing expert and promoter of digital technology. He comes on the program to explain how such a blackout could affect Africans who depend on these apps for communication. Bonte, welcome to the program. Bonte, can you hear us? Bonte, welcome to the show. Okay, we're having connectivity issues there with our guest, Njebere Bonte, whom, like I said, is a digital media promoter. Bonte is joining us to talk about the Facebook outage last week, which affected especially online marketers. Let's find out if he's getting back to us now. Bonte, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ernest. It's a pleasure being on the program.
Hello, Bonte, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Can you please tell us how your immediate region and community responded to the sudden blackout of these social media staples earlier this week?
Unfortunately, we've lost our guest again. Hopefully, he will be back. He's trying to connect with us. Bonte should be speaking live from Abuja in Nigeria. Let's find out if he's back. Bonte, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, we have serious network issues.
And that's okay. I was wondering if you could tell us how your region or immediate community responded to the sudden blackout of the social media apps earlier this week.
Well, it wasn't easy, coupled with the fact that our region, especially Cameroon, we're trying to get back from serious crisis, and businesses depend a lot on social media. And we realize that a lot of people have built their businesses having 80% dependent on social media, especially Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. So the blackout was a big blow to their businesses and individual brands. So it caused a lot of people. It caused a lot of panic. We had a lot of people resetting their phones. We had a lot of people calling their customer service lines, especially telcos, to explain to them that they had the blackout. But they got to realize that it wasn't a telecommunications problem, but it was coming from Facebook. So there was panic. There was panic because people have a lot of conversations, a lot of business transactions that were pending, but because of the outage, it put everything on hold. But we are happy that it got back to normalcy.
Right. Mbonte, I'm talking about business transactions online. We would like to know the kind of businesses that operate on these apps, and would they necessarily be affected if the apps experience just a few hours of blackout? It took, it went away for just 7 hours. So were these businesses really affected per se?
Yeah, exactly. They were affected because most businesses back here in Africa, they really do not have physical stores anymore. So they try to set up businesses having their stores on Facebook, having their stores on Instagram, and keeping close communication with their clients on WhatsApp. So realize that people who were engaging in transactions at that moment were on hold. For example, we're on call with some Nigerian guys, and the call automatically stopped. So at first we thought, okay, probably it's an issue with the network, but we got to realize that it was a general issue. So we realized that aside that, we could imagine the thousands and millions of people were conducting transactions online at that point in time, and everything had to be on standby. So that fear of losing the community you built online, that was what actually got people to panic.
Now, you said there was a lot of panic when when the social media outage first occurred. Could you paint a picture of how a blackout like this could potentially affect both social and economic cohesion if it lasted for a longer period, since so many people rely on them for their livelihood?
Yeah, it's going to affect a lot of things. It's going to affect a lot of things. The good news with us in Africa is that we experience this all the time, so it's really not strange for us because we've been able to see how we could be less dependent on
Mm.
social media, trying to see how we could build interpersonal communication with our clients, our customers, our partners. So, but if the social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp are no longer available today, it's really going to take a time. It's really going to take some time for businesses to build back that audience, because a lot of businesses now have their audiences online because people rely a lot on them for their day-to-day business communications. So if these platforms are to go on blackout today, you are going to see businesses building their marketing and communications gains from scratch. So you have to relook at their strategies on how to go about that.
Hmm. So, are there any lessons people who depend on digital technology for many things should or would have learned from this incident, Bonte?
Yes, but I think the most important is to see how they could build audiences both online and offline, trying to see how they could keep interpersonal communication with your brand, with your clients, via messaging, via contacts. And if you're keen, you're going to realize that a lot of world influencers, that's what they do now. You realize that they put numbers on your profiles, on your web pages that relates directly to them, on calls to be able to avoid such things, such blackout. So it's social media is good. It's been able to catapult a lot of businesses and a lot of brands across the world. But now we need to think beyond that. Okay, what if today we don't have them anymore? How do we survive? How do we keep business flowing? Though it's going to be hard for everything to end on a particular period or a particular day.
Well, Vontae, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for staying with us while we work through the connectivity issues. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is the Apex One News magazine. Now, over the past 2 weeks, the U.S. Border Patrol has continued to apprehend and deport thousands of primary Haitian migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border in Del Rio, Texas, prompting criticism of President Biden's response to the sharp influx of Haitian refugees into the United States over the past year and a half. At the end of last month, federal authorities forcibly cleared an encampment housing over 15,000 migrants. Disturbing images of border control agents rounding up immigrants on horseback spurred public outcry against a national immigration policy that many deemed to be historically racist.
While corruption, poverty, and violence have long been motivating factors for Haitian migrants, the country has recently suffered a new wave of both political instability and natural disaster. On July 7th this year, a group of mercenaries assassinated Haitian President Jovenel Moise, and a month later, a powerful earthquake shook the small nation, leaving thousands dead and many more displaced.
Yet the migration journey for many Haitians now at the US-Mexico border began over a decade ago. Following a devastating earthquake in 2010, many Haitians emigrated to Brazil, where the 2014 FIFA World Cup and the 2016 Summer Olympics held the promise of economic opportunity. Soon after, however, the COVID-19 pandemic began its spread. Job prospects dried up, and countries in the region started closing their borders, triggering a dangerous northwest migration trajectory for many across South America.
Here in the US, restrictive migration policies such as Title 42, an emergency public health order citing the COVID-19 pandemic, which allows federal authorities to detain and expel immigrants without hearing their case for asylum as is required by US law, have come under fire for their inhumanity and for failing to effectively address the growing migrant crisis.
Weeks after the United States withdrew its troops from Afghanistan following a Taliban takeover of Kabul, there are still speculations on America's military might. Some observers have compared Afghanistan to Vietnam, while opponents of Joe Biden think he is a weakling who has just opened up America to its critics. On the program today, we got an in-depth analysis on the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Roderick Inyumia was here to that effect.
And could young people change the perspective of climate change skeptics at the Norwegian rendezvous in November? This has certainly been the question on the minds of many of the promoters of the climate change agenda, who are charged with the responsibility of reversing the opinion that very little has been done to tackle global warming since the 1992 Earth Summit. We spoke to one of the pre-conference attendees in Milan, Raisun Joke, who gave an impassioned plea about the youth's agenda for the climate change conference in Glasgow this November.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of the Apex One News magazine. We will be back in 2 weeks. And until we meet again, thank you so much for listening. Do have a great day. Have a fantastic day, Noella.
Thank you, Ernest, and you too. Goodbye.
Bye.